Greetings! My name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. Welcome to our channel where we cover everything D&D, including advice for players and guides for Dungeon Masters.
We upload new videos on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
As 2021 comes to a close, we just thought we would take this opportunity to take a look back on how the year went for our channel and how things were in the world of Dungeons & Dragons over 2021.
This is going to be a bit of a lighthearted video where we just look back at some of our highlights of the year, some of our favorite moments, favorite videos that we've made, favorite releases, and other little stories that we have about how D&D has been for us. So as you're settling down to celebrate New Year's in the best way for you, we thought maybe you would want to join us and celebrate with us on the successes and highlights of our last year. There's some stuff to discuss today, so let's get rolling.
So while this year has both had highs and low in life more broadly, I think for role-playing games and Dungeons & Dragons, this has been a really exciting year. And I think for Kelly and I think for us, this has been absolutely mind-blowing what has happened for us with the channel and our work this past year. And I come away from 2021 just feeling an insane amount of gratitude for being able to continue doing this work. It really has been a pretty stunning year.
The first thing that I want to start off with this gratitude about the year is that actually this is the first year that Dungeon Dudes is our full-time job. Mm-hmm. And it's been so exciting. The amount of energy that we were able to put into creating the quality content, being able to do more than one video a week. We now do, I think, 6 videos a month instead of usually 4.
Plus our live streams and our Q&As. So I think pretty much we're putting out almost 3 videos a week on the channel, which is crazy to think about it.
Yeah, but that's something that was only possible thanks to the incredible support of you, our audience, our patrons, and all of the wonderful things that we've gotten to participate in this year. We've made a lot of really valuable friendships. We've gotten to chat with a lot of incredible people. And not only that, but we also got to write a book this year.
I think that for both of us, the kind of the most mind-blowing highlight of the year was absolutely the bringing Dungeons of Drakkenheim, our book, onto Kickstarter, which as of the time that you're watching this video, not only did we write the book this year based on our live stream campaign, we brought it to Kickstarter, and actually we delivered the alpha of the finished book with all the art to our backers just a few weeks ago. So while the physical products are still coming, there are already people running their own Dungeons of Drakkenheim adventures, and we're just so thrilled about that.
Some of the stories that have been coming back from those who have already started Drakkenheim campaigns have been some of the most heartwarming moments of my entire year. People talking even a little bit about how the start of their campaign went so smoothly, and the things that we had written advertised so well the type of campaign that it was supposed to be. We heard some terms thrown around like immaculately written adventure sites, or this is the best written book. Like, I
don't want to toot our own horn too much.
I'm not saying that that's true, but the fact that people have even thought of saying that to us is so humbling and so heartwarming, and I'm just in awe of a lot of the positivity that's been involved in that. And for the first time in my life, I feel encouraged to keep writing. I feel encouraged, like, maybe I can write adventure books, you know?
Yeah, I've done it once. Let's see what happens again. I want to actually acknowledge, though, that we did raise over $1 million on Kickstarter, which is a huge achievement. But I think that it's part of this rising tide lifting all boats, because I think that we were one of 10 $1 million Kickstarters that happened in the role-playing game space this year. And that has never happened before. There have been a couple RPG Kickstarters in prior years that have made over $1 million, but there were more this year than there have been combined before, especially when we only look at books and like content. There have been several Kickstarters that do things like that have been for accessories or miniatures, or Dwarven Forge has done amazing multi-million-dollar Kickstarters and stuff like that. But for actual role-playing game adventures, supplements, and books, it was an incredible year. And so I think that I feel like we're part of that beautiful rising tide, and that's really exciting. We have seen a real rise in the caliber of third-party publishers, like our partners at Ghostfire Games, that have put out really high-quality books for 5th edition with lots of great assets, lots of production values, but also lots of creativity and great things to use in your games.
You know, interesting that you brought this up, because I actually think I've backed more Kickstarters this year than I have any other year. And I really like exploring new RPGs. So I definitely jumped in on the Avatar: The Last Airbender. I jumped in on Mothership, which I'm really excited about, which has actually been an RPG that's been in release for a while, but they call that version 0. And now they're officially releasing version 1, which they did a Kickstarter for, and it just sounds super cool.
And I think that we are seeing more and more people playing online. I think that that's been a really interesting thing for the hobby, in that even though we haven't been able to necessarily be in person for all of the year together, we've been able to come back in person partway through. But I think that in many ways, the impetus to play D&D online through virtual tabletops like Roll20 or Foundry or more, we actually have been able to try it playing on Foundry VTT as well, and trying different virtual tabletops has been really, really cool. I think the health of the role-playing game industry, and Dungeons & Dragons specifically, it's never been better. There have been both highs and lows with both the official Dungeons & Dragons releases this year, but I think one of the takeaways of it is that there's lots of vibrancy and creativity regardless of what happens with the official releases.
And speaking of the official releases, I think that we should take this moment to talk about those. And what we want to highlight here is Monty and I both grabbed pretty much every book that came out officially this year, and we're able to read through them. We released several videos on our channel reviewing several of these books. I think we were talking earlier, and I think we actually share an opinion on what we think the most exciting book released this year was.
So we had Candlekeep Mysteries. We had the setting guide with some new player options in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. We had another adventure come out this year in the form of Wild Beyond the Witchlight, set in the Feywild. And then we also had another Magic the Gathering crossover in Strixhaven, A Curriculum of Chaos, which turned out to be less sourcebook and more adventure as well. So really, this was an adventure-heavy year for official D&D releases. But then in the midst of all that, we also had what I think is my favorite of the year, Fizban's Treasury of Dragons.
I absolutely agree. I think that Fizban's was the highlight of the book releases for the year for me. Not only was it a great source book that had inspiration for all types of worlds of D&D, but I mean, what's a game of D&D without dragons?
Yes.
I know, like, some people don't use dragons very much, but I love using dragons, and the amount of dragons that they added to the game, the amount of inspiration for adventures based on dragons. It isn't an adventure book, but when I flip through it, my ability to homebrew using this book is amplified tenfold.
Yes.
I have to do 50% of the homebrew work by using Fizban's, and that is why I think it's such a powerful book.
Yeah, I think that if you're looking at the official titles that came out this year and is like, which is the one to get, I think Fizban's is it. I think my second pick would probably go to Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft.
Ravenloft did introduce, my favorite part of it were the monsters. It introduced a lot of great horror-themed monsters. And a really cool look at going beyond just Curse of Strahd in the worlds of Ravenloft. So I do think that that is the second choice for a book. A really strong option. If you're into gothic horror, that is definitely a book you want to pick up. So we reviewed a lot of these books, but we also released a bunch of other videos this year. And we released some of what I think are my favorite videos that we've ever released on this channel.
Yeah, I'm really proud. I think we saw a lot of great discussion as well come out of many of these videos. I think one of the first ones that really comes out for me is the video that we made about making the strongest party. And that was a lot of fun to make that. There was so much back and forth between you and I about which characters would we pick for the different parties that we would build. And then I loved the discussion
I really liked both of our parties, and I actually think we could do like a part 2, like 2 different strongest party builds.
A lot of people asked us to see what would happen if we had a battle royale between those two groups, which would be a fun thing maybe to try next year.
Yeah.
And I thought that so many other people came forward with like their great suggestions of like the all paladin party or the all cleric party or the all wizard party. Or other different group combinations that got suggested in the chat that I really, really, really liked as well. I thought that it was a really interesting conversation topic, and while it doesn't reflect any way that people actually play D&D, it's still a fun thought experiment, and I really enjoyed making that video.
When we talk about videos that we love, there's one that actually stood out to me, and it's because of how important the topic is for me personally in D&D, and that is the video that we did on retrain, reflavor, and retcon. What we highlighted in that video is such an important aspect of D&D for me, because when D&D really came alive for me, what if you take what's presented, but you can twist it in almost any way you want, by just the way you decide to describe it.
Yes.
And the moment I decided that was the moment that D&D became so much more open. And so that video really broadcasted what I think is one of the most important aspects of the game to me.
It's such an important thing to have in your toolbox as both a player and a dungeon master. And in the same vein, another video that I was really proud of that we made was our video on running skill challenges. And also one of the ones that we did around the same time was our video on running mysteries, where we talked about all the different ways that you can use the mechanics of skill checks and ability checks and spells and combine that with really good descriptions and a really good framing to create a tool set to adjudicate various types of non-combat encounters and other scenarios in your games of D&D.
One last video that I want to mention is one that actually really impacted me as a dungeon master, and that was when we did our video on designing a dungeon in 3 simple steps. And it all went back to, we were actually doing a review, or we were doing a product review years ago. It was when they released the new dungeon tile sets.
Yes, for the official card dungeon sets. Yeah.
And what Monty and I did in that review video was we dumped them out on the table. We both started at separate ends, pieced them together, scooped up a few minis that we thought looked cool, popped them in, and then said, okay, what's the story here? And within 15 to 20 minutes, we had come up with an actual cool plot hook, a cool dungeon with a very dynamic range of things going on in it. And we looked back at that and we said, well, what was the magic that happened there? What made that work? And so when we made the video for designing a dungeon in 3 easy steps, we kind of took that practice that we had fun with and broke it down so that other people could have that same fun of almost using dungeon design like a Lego set.
Yeah, and I think that one of the big things that I learned both in talking about that video, but then in comparing it to writing Drakkenheim this year, is how different designing an adventure that you're going to use in your game is from a written module. I think one of my experiences in writing the Drakkenheim book is that for me in running the campaign, so much of it was improvisation, so much of it was responding to the player character's actions, and I realized how when you put this into writing, it just makes everything seem it has to be this way. And so I wanted to be really careful and really reinforce that like, no, just because the author wrote that on a page doesn't mean that you have to do it that way. It was a realization that I had also in writing it is that anytime I've run a published adventure, I've always changed things.
I read through a published adventure and then basically set the book aside and run it without looking at the book. It's one of those weird things that I do where like I will take notes from the book. I'm running the Sunless Citadel right now. And so I have notes on like some names of kobolds, some names of goblins, and whereabouts they are. But I was reading it and it was like, there's 2 goblins in this room. There's 3 in this room. I'm like, there's just a bunch of goblins everywhere, and they're going to come whenever I feel like they're going to pop up. And so I ran it like that. And the better you get at DMing, the more you realize that like you're using these pre-written modules as inspiration, so that you can then close the book and be like, I got this. There's kobolds, there's goblins, let's do it.
And then it's always there with resources and guidelines and everything like that. And I think that that's what we tried to navigate in our writing style for it. So as more people are getting their hands on these, I'm really excited to hear what people thought. I love that we can have conversations with people who are running Drakkenheim. And that through Kickstarter and through YouTube and through our Discord and our Patreon, we've been able to talk with people that have been running the game and dungeon masters who have asked us questions directly, like, how do I adjudicate this? Like, I have a player character that wants to play a centaur or a satyr in Drakkenheim. How should we do this? And being able to say, well, there's a couple different options for navigating that. And that kind of back and forth is something that I've really been able to enjoy as the author, and I'm so excited to see what people do with this world. It's been a real privilege to put that out there.
Speaking of playing Drakkenheim and running our games and throwing books aside and improving everything, what was your favorite moment of playing or DMing this year?
Yeah, so this year we continued the Shadows of Drakkenheim, but Shadows of Drakkenheim has been fun because we've had several hiatuses along the way. We've had first when things started in 2020, where we took a break and did our Untold Tales, and then when at the end of last year we took a little bit of extended break while one of our party members had their baby. And so we got to have our Untold Tales of Drakkenheim, where we got to play with some really cool guests. And that was a lot of fun, being able to do that. I really enjoyed our game that we played with Matt Ruff. We had it was so thrilling to have fun guests on the show playing with us through those. I got the chance to play, too, when you ran the Pale Man stuff. So I think for me, that was a lot of fun.
Those were all great. When I think of myself, I think of, obviously, my highlight as a player is always going to be playing in Drakkenheim. Mm-hmm. And I remember at the beginning of Shadows of Drakkenheim, I'm very much in love with Sebastian Crow from Dungeons of Drakkenheim. And I always do this, where once you finish a campaign with a character, you're so in love with them that starting a new character, you're like, you're not as good. Yeah. And I had a hard time. I was like, who is Wilhelm? What is he doing? How am I role-playing him right? Is he cool? Is he good enough? And this year, we got to see such interesting character growth.
Yeah.
And I got to really explore it. Where we are now, and some of the revelations and some of the secrets that I slipped to Monty for my character that have been able to be explored openly now in our show, have been some of the most interesting and dramatic moments that I've ever had as a player character.
Without spoiling too much, we've had 2 separate adventuring parties exploring the world of Drakkenheim over the past 2 years, and we finally did have a moment where the 2 adventuring parties met each other face to face, and you, Jill, and Joe had to play 2 characters simultaneously, not in a combat encounter, but actually role-playing the conversation between all 6 of your characters. And I just sat back for about 2 hours and watched this happen. And it was immaculate. Like, I was so... As someone who, in a prior episode years ago, I role-played 6 different NPCs in one episode as part of one... It felt like the inversion of that. And it was really cool to see how well all of you were able to role-play characters with very conflicting interests and very conflicting personalities. And that... you often hear about people who do play more than one character in a party, and it's often thought about in the combat situations where like each player's got 2 in the combat, right? But this was not that. And it's so cool to see like, oh, that's a thing that you can do.
I will say, in a much simpler capacity, I also got to start DMing again in person this year, which was really exciting. I started with a new group of players, some old, some new, and we started a brand new campaign. It's kind of my mashup of Dragon Heist and Yawning Portal, and I've kind of combined them into something that I call Waterdeep Tavern Tycoon. And it's my group of players own a tavern in Waterdeep, and they're trying to compete. They're down the street from the Yawning Portal, and so they're trying to compete with it. But in one of their first adventures, my level 2 party ran into a group of Twig Blights, and I'm looking at the Twig Blights. They have mild AC and like 4 hit points. And I'm like, okay, there's 4 of them. They're level 2. I'm going to throw 6 of twig blights at them. I have these brambly bushes, the curious wizard who roleplays his wizard immaculately. And so naturally he instigates combat. The twig blights get a surprise round and they down the wizard. I almost total party killed the whole party with 6 twig blights. And at the end they were like, that was really hard. And I was like, guys, they have 4 hit points. Like, somebody just had to do anything and they would have crumbled. But it was such a fun early, I love early D&D for those moments. But that was one of the first times that they're like, oh, we should be more careful when we're walking into situations. So that was a highlight.
Having now reflected back on how the year went, what are you looking forward to next year in D&D and the channel and otherwise?
For next year, I'm excited to maybe hear more about this new evolution of D&D that's coming. I know that that's not for a few years, but maybe some more news next year.
Yeah.
I'm also excited to see what the new releases are. I'm hoping for another Of Everything book that we might get that maybe introduces some more cool stuff. Obviously, the release of our book. And of course, I'm really excited to not only continue my adventures at my home table, start a new season of Drakkenheim.
Yes.
And see where that goes, because I feel in the next year, we're really going to see the climactic moments. Maybe not the end. We might not finish in this year coming, but it's starting to build up in really interesting ways. So I'm very excited about all of that. Also, trying out some new RPGs, and I get to run a few games early next year.
Yeah. I think for me as well, absolutely. Season 3 of our Drakkenheim campaign, which will be called Fate of Drakkenheim, will be starting up in February of 2022. So we're going to be having our holiday hiatus, taking a little bit of extra time off to finish some other projects, to play a couple other collaborative games, and try out some other RPGs just for a couple weeks. So I'm really looking forward to the new season. We're not going to be making new characters. We're going to be playing with the existing characters. So we're going to see some really cool high-level D&D this year. Because all of our characters are 10th or even 13th level or higher. And so I'm excited about possibly taking the Drakkenheim saga up to tier 4 play and seeing what happens when we get some 17th level characters rocking around in the world of Drakkenheim. Yeah. That'll be a fun place to take it. It's really our own live stream campaign has kind of grown beyond the book. I think in an interesting way, like we talk about in the Drakkenheim book, for those that have it, about different ways that it can kind of conclude, and there's really no telling how a Drakkenheim campaign might end. And whether or not it will grow beyond what you create, because it is a very open-ended campaign. And so we're feeling that right now with all the different weaving paths that it can take. And so it'll be fun to break new ground in that respect, and see what happens when we extrapolate what we created already into something new.
So this has been a look at our year in review, looking at the Dungeon Dudes and Dungeons and Dragons. Tell us about your favorite D&D moments in the comments below.
Once again, we just want to give a massive thank you. Whether you have been watching and subscribing to our videos here on YouTube, following and subscribing to us on Twitch, whether you were a backer of our Kickstarter project or have been a patron of us through Patreon and chatted with us on our Discord, both Kelly and I just want to extend our heartfelt gratitude for being a part of this community and being a part of this journey. It should go without saying, but it needs to be said that we could not have done this without you and your support. And we feel so fortunate and privileged to be able to be along for this ride, because it's been life-changing for both of us. And we hope that whether the advice or the worlds or the ideas that we've shared with you, if they've added just a little bit of fun into your game tables, that's the most important thing for us.
So once again, thank you so much for joining us. And if you're watching this video, thank you for being a part of our year and looking back at it and talking about all of the great moments we've had and sharing those moments with you. Again, we're going to be starting up the new season of Drakkenheim, Fate of Drakkenheim, which is coming in February. But if you want to check out our previous season, Shadows of Drakkenheim, you can watch all the previous episodes of that show right up over here.
We are going to be doing a review of our subclass tier rankings that we have now finished up over the year as well. And so if you want to check back on those before that review comes out, right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Once again, a huge thank you. We will see you next year
in the dungeon.